Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session on building Slack apps. I'm really excited to be talking with you all today, and I hope you're excited to walk away from this session and conference excited and ready to build Slack apps with our most modern platform features. My name is Shay DeWale. I'm a developer advocate on our developer relations team, and I'm joined here by Steve Gill, who's an open source engineer also on our developer relations team. So this session is split up into a couple of different sections. First, we're going to go over what Slack apps are and the different kinds that exist. Then we're going to talk about our developer tools, specifically our Bolt framework. Then we're going to use those tools to talk about the different platform features and functionality. And then most of our time is going to be spent in a hands-on demo with Steve. So let's start off by talking about what Slack apps are. So enterprises use tens to hundreds of different apps and software on a daily basis. There are updates, notification, and information being spread through them all. The role of Slack apps are to customize your Slack workspace by piping that data into a place that it's collaborative and actionable for your team. And there are multiple ways to integrate apps into Slack. The first one is workflow apps, which allow you to automate work inside and outside of Slack using our workflow builder tool. And then there are custom apps and directory apps. These both use our full suite of APIs to develop deep solutions that integrate directly into Slack. The difference here are custom apps are tailored for a single workspace or organization, whereas directory apps are completely public, so they can be installed on any workspace or organization pending admin approval. To go a little bit deeper into these, workflow apps are composed of a trigger and a set of steps. A trigger can be something like a user joining a channel, someone clicking the shortcuts button, or even a webhook firing from an external service. After a trigger is clicked, a set of steps is run. Steps can be something like sending a message to a channel, or collecting user input, or using new steps that connect to external services. And as I said, custom apps deeply integrate tools and systems into Slack with a range of native functionality. With custom apps, you have access to a set of surface where you can customize the UI. You also have different access points, like the shortcuts menu, as well as workflow steps and message context menus. You also can listen and respond to events happening throughout your workspace, like users joining the team or someone posting a message in a channel. So now that we've talked about what Slack apps are, there's a lot of different ways to develop them. One option is to code your app from scratch, but our platform also has a collection of developer tools that make building simpler. One of these is Bolt, which is a framework that speeds up and simplifies app development by wrapping our different platform APIs and features behind a simple interface. Bolt for JavaScript has been out for over a year, and it's already used and trusted by enterprises like IBM and American Airlines. And Bolt is available in JavaScript, Java, and is now available in beta for Python. Regardless of which language you use, Bolt has built-in defaults to make building easier. There's advanced type support to understand method and event params right from your text editor. There are smart defaults for things like token validation and rate limiting. And it's built to be easier to deploy to a variety of hosting platforms like AWS, Azure, or Heroku. And there's embedded code throughout the documentation. So once you have an initial Bolt app set up, you can copy and paste code throughout the API site into your app. And while Bolt offers this high-level abstraction as well as smart defaults, you can also use our lower-level SDKs for a more customized approach. These are also available in JavaScript, Java, and Python, but there are also community SDKs in languages like Ruby, Go, and PHP. Now that we've talked a little bit about our development frameworks, let's connect that to the platform and talk about some other developer tools. So in this overview, I'm going to talk about the different APIs, interactivity that exist, as well as different access points that custom apps have access to. So Slack apps are built around this permission model of scopes. And scopes are tied to specific pieces of functionality within Slack. For example, if you want to unfurl a link posted to a channel, you'll need the links write scope. Or if you want to use shortcuts and slash commands, you'll need the command scope. And these scopes are set up within your app configuration. And once you have the scope set up in your app configuration and you want a user to install your app, you'll go through an OAuth flow. In that flow, your app is going to ask the user for a set of scopes. That user will grant or deny those scopes. And when they grant them, your app is going to get a temporary authorization code. Your app can exchange that authorization code for an access token, which holds all of the permissions of that installation of your app. And Bolt has built-in support to handle this authorization exchange, handle state, and token management. And once you have this token, you can use the permissions behind it. For example, you can use our web API to post information into Slack as well as query for information. So you can use methods to send a message to a channel, unfurl a link, or open a modal. You can also query for information like a list of workspace users or messages inside of a channel. And Bolt includes a built-in web client that makes it easier to call web API methods with built-in retry logic and error handling. And as you're posting a message to a channel, opening a modal, or unfurling a link, you can use our collection of common UI components called BlockKit. These components allow you to lay out static information as well as add interactivity with components like buttons, date pickers, select menus, and more. Bolt for Java has a built-in library that makes it easier to compose these blocks for different surfaces. And when you're adding these things like buttons and other interactive features, your app is going to have to handle this interactive flow. So let's say you're using one of the BlockKit buttons and your app wants to send that into a message in Slack. When your app sends that message, you're going to connect an action ID to that specific button. When that message appears in channel and the user clicks that button, the Slack API is going to hear that button click and send your app a payload that gives you information about that specific click. And this is what that payload is going to look like. It shows you the type of event, the action ID that directly correlates with that button, as well as a trigger ID, which shows user intent and allows you to open a modal. And Bolt has a common listener pattern that Steve will talk about that makes it easier to respond and listen to these interactions happening within Slack. And you can use these common UI components and interactive components across many different surfaces. You're probably familiar with messages, which can be in public and private channels, as well as DMs with your app. You can also use modals, which are a pop-up interface that allow you to collect user information or display deeper dynamic information for that user. Or Home tab, which is accessible via global search or the left-hand sidebar, and that can be a persistent interface for users, customized on a per-user basis, so you can customize that content just for them. And to build for these different surfaces, you can use our tool BlockKit Builder. This allows you to drag and drop different blocks, and once you're satisfied with your design, you can copy and paste the JSON payload directly into your Bolt app. And there is another session on BlockKit right after this at 11 a.m. And while surfaces and UI spaces are where you can interact with users, there are also invocation and entry points into your app that users can access. Two of these are global shortcuts and message shortcuts. Global shortcuts are available in the Composer and Search, and it's good for core features of your app, like creating a poll or opening a ticket. Message shortcuts are available on a message basis in the overflow menu. This is good for attaching messages to outside context, like attaching a message to an external project. And an example of a message shortcut is in our Slack developer tools. Slack developer tools is a public app that we've built that makes it easier to develop Slack apps. The message shortcut that it contains is inspect. So if you see a message that you think has a good design, you can inspect it and copy the payload for inspiration. As well as the inspect feature, you can also look up methods and test homepage design inside of Slack without having to install another test app. And your app may want to respond to events already happening within Slack as well. The Events API allows you to receive events like when a user posts into a channel or when a user joins your team. Events are configured while you're setting up your app with the proper scopes associated with them. This is what that looks like. In the app configuration at the top, you can see that we're subscribing to the team join event. This requires the user's read scope, so you can see that in the app configuration as well. After this app is installed on a team, when a user joins that team, Slack will hear that event and send your app a team join event. This is what that event will look like. There's information about the team, the type of event, and information about the user. Bolt uses the same common listener pattern that allows you to quickly listen and respond to these events happening in Slack workspaces. And lastly, custom apps can plug into Workflow Builder using custom steps from apps. This allows users to plug in pieces of your app's features and functionality directly into their own customized workflows. Bolt offers a simplified interface to create these steps as well as route them. And there's a session all about steps from apps tomorrow that's going to go over building them in Bolt for JavaScript. Now that I've given an overview of the platform and what developer tools might make it easier, I'm going to let Steve take over to go deeper into Bolt.
Thanks, Shay, for the great overview of the Slack platform. All right, and now we're going to jump into creating a custom app using Bolt. Before I dive in, I want to let everyone know that the demo app that I'll be going over today is available on GitHub. You can see the link here. So you don't have to worry about frantically taking notes during this presentation. And this link, as well as these slides, will be shared with you after. So let's dive in. So if I was creating a new application, the first place I would start is slack.dev. This is the home of the documentation of all of our developer tools. You can see that we have some of the lower level SDKs available here, the Node Slack SDK, the Python Slack client, the Java Slack SDK. But we also have our documentation for Bolt here. And you can see we have the JavaScript documentation linked over here, as well as the Java, Bolt for Java. And Bolt for Python will be releasing very soon, and that will also end up over here. So let's go ahead and go over to the JavaScript documentation, as that is what I will be demoing today. Right off the bat, it takes you to a getting started guide. It's a great place to start your journey here. On the left-hand side, you see a bunch of basic concepts as well as advanced concepts. I will be covering some of these in my demo app today, but definitely come back and go over this site. A lot of the examples I show are available on this website as well. So it's a good place to go. So now that we're ready to create our app, we would go to api.slack.com/apps and create a brand new app. You would give it a name and select a development workspace. I've already gone ahead and done this. You can see right here, I have a Frontiers demo ready to go. And from there, a few things to note. In this basic information section, we have things like our client ID, client secret, signing secret, which I'll cover in a second. And we also could use this opportunity to install the application to our development workspace. So I've already done it, but I could click reinstall, go ahead and click allow. And now it's been installed in my development workspace. So let's go look at some code and actually start coding up this app. So to start with Bolt, first you need to npm install the Slack Bolt package and then you would require it in your application. I've created an app.js here. And the main thing that I want to get here is this app export. And then I would initialize app right away. And app takes in two properties to get started. The first is a token, and the second is a signing secret. Both of these values we can actually get from our app config. And in this example, I've actually saved these variables to environment variables. So that's why you're not seeing my actual token and signing secret here. It's generally good practice to not check those in to your repositories. So environment variables is a great way to deal with it. And then from there, all we would do is call the start method on app, and we would provide a port. In our example, the port is 3000, and then we just console log something simple like Bolt app is running, just to let us know. Under the hood, Bolt uses Express.js, so it actually starts an Express server on this port. So let's go ahead and click node app.js. Bolt is running. Perfect. So let's go actually dive a little deeper into the token and signing secret where you get it. So if I go back to the app config, you can see under install app, I actually have an access token here, bot access token. It's also available under the OAuth and permission section over here. It's the exact same token. Generally, you need to provide a scope when you're doing the initial install. Something as simple as chat write, which gives you permission to write for your app to write to a channel. The signing secret you can get from basic information, as I mentioned before. We actually use this signing secret to verify that incoming requests are from Slack. It's not from some third party pretending to be Slack. Okay, great. So we've gotten those. Now let's actually, before we do, you can see in my workspace here that Frontier's demo is already here under apps because I've already installed it. But the app doesn't actually do anything at the moment. So let's actually add some functionality. One thing that I personally like to do is say we're building an app that answers questions, a chat style app. For that to work, generally we would need to listen to an app mention event. So if someone mentions my app and asks a question, I would receive that request and appropriately respond. So it's time to add some functionality to our app. Let's, for example, say we're building an app that responds to questions, a chat style app. So a user could mention my app, ask a question, and my app would receive that request and then respond in channel to that question. To do something like that, I would need to listen to the app mention event. So to do that, we need to subscribe to the app mention event. We can go to our app config and go to the event subscriptions section, and we can go here to subscribe bot events. And down below, you can see I've already subscribed to the app mention event. And what this does is when this event is fired, Slack will send a payload to your application. So we actually need to provide a request URL. This tells Slack where to send that payload so your app can receive it. As I mentioned earlier, Bolt uses an Express.js instance under the hood. So it automatically creates a path to receive Slack calls from. And the path is usually Slack/events, whatever your URL is. In this example, I'm using a service called ngrok to expose my local host. So all calls will go to this endpoint described here, Slack/events. And my Bolt application will automatically determine the appropriate listener to send that request to based on the type of the payload. Another thing to note here is with this app_mention event, it also requires an app mentions read scope. So to add scopes, or also known as permissions, I would go back to OAuth and permissions, make sure that that scope is added. You can see I've already added it. And as I mentioned, when the request comes in, we want to post back to the channel. So we also need a scope for that. And in this example, it's chat.write, to send a message back to channel. Generally, when you add new scopes, you need to reinstall your application. Here, you would make sure you're okay with the permissions being asked, click allow. Great, the application is added. Let's go back to our code. So I've already got an example here of handling the app mention event. So I'm using a special listener in Bolt called app.event. It listens for events. Um, and with all listeners in Bolt, the first argument is what we're matching against. And the second argument is the callback, what to run when the matching succeeds. So we're matching against the app mention event. And then this callback, it has two arguments. One is the event. That's the actual payload we get back from Slack. And the second argument is a client. So this is an instance of a web client that Bolt exposes to you. And it's already got things like the token bound to it. So when we're making API calls, we don't need to provide the token because it's already there under the hood. And all this does is it calls the chat.postMessage API call. And we provide the channel that we want to post that response to. And in this example, it's already in the payload. So the same channel that we received the question in. And then all we're saying is thanks for the mention and mentioning the user. Pretty straightforward. Let's stop this and run it. Great, the Bolt.js application is running. Let's go to Slack. So I've created a channel here, Frontiers Demo, and I'm gonna go ahead and invite my bot to the channel. And now I can say, hey, at Frontiers Demo, what is up? And it responds as expected. Thanks for the mention, and it says my username. Great, pretty simple to add that functionality. Now let's add a bit more functionality here. Let's say I'm building an app that gets triggered on a keyword. Say maybe every time it sees the keyword cat, it could post an image of a cat, something like that. It's up to you what your app would do, but that's just one example. So there, once again, there's a new event we need to listen to. And in this example, the event is message.channels. You can see it right here. I have an example available, but before that, let's go to our app config and make sure we are subscribed to the event. You can see message.channels is already in here, and it tells us what scope is required, channels.history. And you know, I'm sharing events that I already have pre-planned here, but there is a giant list of which events are available to you. If you go to api.slack.com/events, you can see a giant list here. For instance, if you wanted to publish an app home for your application, you would listen to the app home event and publish a view after that event is fired. Something to definitely check out in your own time afterwards. So once again, back to our example, channels history, let's make sure we have that permission. Go to our scopes. There's channels history. If you need to reinstall your application, go ahead. And let's go back to our code. I'm gonna go ahead and uncomment this out. So in this example, I'm listening for the hello as the keyword. When hello comes in, all I'm gonna say is thanks for the mention the username, and then provide a button this time around. But there's a few things I wanna mention before I dive into that. First, you can see I'm not using app.event listener, and instead I'm using the app.message listener. Under the hood, we are listening to the message.channels event, but Bolt provides this nice convenient method on top of that message.channels event to actually allow you to filter for a specific keyword or message. So in this example, I'm listening to hello, and it does follow the same pattern. The first argument is what I'm matching against. The second argument is the callback, and the callback takes two arguments. The first being the payload of the message received, and the second is this special new function I haven't mentioned before called say. So say is something that Bolt exposes that really under the hood, all it's doing is calling client.chat.postMessage. And it does things for you like automatically binds the channel that it was originally, that we originally received the message in. It also, bounds the token and things like that as well. So we can directly call say, and in this example, instead of providing a text, I'm actually providing a block. I decided to use BlockKit here. So I start by providing a section with the thanks for the message, mention the username, and then I say click my fancy button. And then I provide an accessory. So this is how you add things like buttons to your applications. So I have a type button, And the one thing I want to note here is that I do provide a value, and I also provide an action ID. And this action ID is important, and we'll be coming back to that in a second. So let's save this. Let's rerun our application. Back to Slack. Now we can just say the keyword hello. Thanks for the mention, Stephen Gill. Click my fancy button. Great, let's click it. Oh, you can see we got the spinner, and then it times out. We get a little error message, operation timed out. Apps need to respond within 3 seconds. This is completely expected because we haven't actually handled that button click yet. So to handle that button click, first we need to go back to our app config and make sure we have interactivity and shortcuts enabled. So anytime something like a button is clicked, Slack needs to send that payload to a specific request URL. Once again, I'm using the exact same request URL that I used for the event subscriptions. It'll go to our Bolt application, and our Bolt application will properly route it to the appropriate listener based on the type of the payload. So this is good. We got it set up. We go back to our code, and let's look at what the listener for an action looks like. So now we're using an app.action listener. And once again, the first argument in this example is what we're matching against is the action ID, which we can see it from above. So it's gonna, once this button is clicked, it's gonna match with this listener, and it's gonna call this callback. The arguments in the callback, something you may be familiar with already, but first it's the payload we get back from Slack, the action payload in this scenario. Then it's this new function, which I haven't described yet, called ACK, also stands for acknowledgement. And then again, I have say, which I will use to respond and post a message back to Slack. So what ACK does is it actually acknowledges to Slack, hey, we received your request, thank you. We're gonna deal with it, we promised, but that's all we're saying. And that way Slack knows that something is coming back. It doesn't need to give that little warning. Generally, we have 3 seconds to respond to Slack to do this. And you may be wondering why we didn't have to send an acknowledgement for, say, our app events or app message. And the answer to that is because Bolt will automatically send acknowledgements for events that come in. It doesn't do that for actions. It doesn't do that for shortcuts and other things, but it does do it for events. So we say await OAC, we say await say, thanks for clicking my fancy button. Pretty simple. Let's stop this, rerun it, go back to our Slack application, say hello, our keyword. Thanks for the mention, click my fancy button. I click it, thanks for clicking my fancy button. Great, so simple. Now I want to jump to another example. Shay mentioned shortcuts as a great entry point for your application, so I wanted to demo that. So under this interactivity and shortcuts section in our app config, you'll see there's a shortcuts section. Here I can actually create a new shortcut, a global shortcut or a message shortcut. Global shortcut you can find from the composer, this little lightning bolt icon, or from search. And message shortcuts you can find from these 3 little dots on every messages. Once you go to click create, you would give it a name, you would give it a description, and this is the part that's really important, is you would give it a callback ID, and that's what we're going to be using for matching our listener. So you can see I've already created a Frontier shortcut, and I've given it the callback ID launch_shortcut. Let's go back to our code. You'll see I already have an example. Let me comment this out, or uncomment it, I should say. And for shortcuts, you generally need the commands permission. So that's one thing I did not go over, but if you go to OAuth and permissions, make sure you have commands in your list here. You can see I have it right here. Reinstall your application if it requires. Back to the code. So I'm using the listener for shortcuts, which is aptly called app.shortcut. Pretty easy to remember. And the first argument is what we're matching against. And in this example, it's the callback I just showed you, launch_shortcut. If you haven't seen it, interactivity and shortcuts. There it is again, just one more time. And then I have the callback, which I call, which has a shortcut argument, an ACK, an acknowledgement. And in this scenario, I'm using client again to call a web API method. So right off the bat, I do an acknowledgement, let Slack know that, hey, I got the request, I'm dealing with it. And then I'm calling the views.open API. And this is going to open a modal. Once again, I'm using blocks here. It's just going to be a simple modal. It's going to have a close button. This is the title of it. Let's actually see how that looks. Stop this, start it. Let's go back to Slack. Let's go to the shortcut menu here. You'll see Frontiers demo. There it is, my app. About the simplest modal you can conceive of. Pretty easy. And the nice thing with modals is you can actually stack them, and there's quite a bit of functionality in there available to you there. So in this code, I just want to back up a second. I used client.views.open. That was a web API call. And previously, before that, I used client.chat.postMessage. So there are actually many API methods available to you. And if you want to see the full list, you can go to api.slack.com/methods, and you can see it's quite a large list of what API methods are available to you. So definitely spend some time here, see what functionality is available to you and what you could potentially use to build out your applications. Okay, so we're almost at the end of the demo. I wanted to say that I did include a demo for App Home as well in this code, just basically subscribing to the App Home opened and publishing a view. I'm not going to go over that demo right now, but if you do download the GitHub repo, you'll be able to see that demo for yourself. Now, with the remaining time, I wanted to spend some time going over OAuth. So at the start of this application, I provided a token. This token is tied specifically to my development workspace that I'm working in currently. But if you expect your app to be installed by other people, maybe through the App Store, maybe through your website, some other means, you need to implement OAuth. So to do so, Bolt makes it really easy. First off, you would need to comment out your token. And then there's a few other fields we need to include instead. First, we need to include the client ID and client secret. These are available on your basic information page in your app config, same place where we got our signing secret from. And this just helps Slack, identify which application this OAuth request is coming from, what app it's for. Then we need to provide a state secret. It should just be a random string. We use that to encode the state parameter when doing OAuth calls. And then we also decode it at the end of the OAuth flow. And that's just kind of an extra security measure to make sure no one is hijacking your OAuth calls in between. And lastly, we provide the scopes that our application needs. So I've just got a big list here. So what I would do is stop this, start my application. Good, it's running. So under the hood, what Bolt is doing now is it actually creates two new URLs for OAuth. One is to initiate the OAuth flow, and the second is to handle the OAuth payload after the user allows the permission or denies the permission. So that first URL is actually slack/install on whatever your URL is. The path is appended to it. You can see it here running on my local host. And it just creates a little add to Slack button that has all of your scopes attached to it as well. So go ahead and click add to Slack. Here it is. It's requesting all the permissions I need for the application. I'm going to go ahead and click allow. Now at this point, Slack needs to know where to send that success or failure of the installation. So to specify that, we go back to our app config, we go to OAuth and permissions, we provide that second URL I was mentioning. And that second URL is slack/OAuth_redirect. So someone clicks allow, great. Slack knows where to send that successful response. It's to this URL. So that gets sent back to our Bolt application. Our Bolt application will take that payload. It comes with a temporary code in there. We exchange that code for a proper token. And then generally we save that token to some sort of database so we can reuse that for future API calls. So you can see back to this, it was successful. I can even click open and it takes me right to my Frontiers demo app home here. And that's OAuth. A few things to note is right now, by default, we're saving the tokens that we receive via OAuth to a memory installation store, which is just for development. It means that when I stop running this application down here, I actually lose that token and I would have to reinitiate the OAuth flow to get the token back. Generally, you would want to save that to a database, and there is an interface that we provide to make that really simple to do. It's an installation store. I recommend going to the Bolt.js documentation and checking out the OAuth article in there to see how to create an installation store to save and fetch these access tokens. So let's go over what we covered. Use Slack APIs to post information and listen to events. As you saw in our example, we used two web API methods, chat.postMessage and views.open. But there are many more available to you on the API website. Take a look to see what's there. Use BlockKit and Interactivity to engage users across surfaces. You saw in my demo, I used buttons, I used modals. So definitely check out BlockKit. Bolt speeds up and simplifies development. I mean, I think you all saw that. And Bolt uses listeners to route incoming messages. That's kind of the magic of Bolt, is it receives that payload and using a common pattern of matching followed by callback, it's quite easy to get your applications going. So now for you to get started, make sure you grab the repository from GitHub. Check out the documentation for Bolt at slack.dev and check out our API documentation on api.slack.com. We also have a great Slack platform community where a lot of other Slack builders are there asking questions, helping each other. So you can check that out at slackcommunity.com. And make sure to attend the BlockKit session following this session at 11 here. And tomorrow, make sure to check out the workflow steps from app session, where they will use Bolt.js to show how we've added support for workflow steps. And with that, I want to say thank you, and we're open for questions.